Hi, this is David Kettlewell, your host of mastersofharmonica.com, and this is the fourth in our series on breath. What are some of the main ideas here that we go over again and again? Breath is everything. Your ability to master the chromatic harmonica more than anything else is dependent on your control of and mastery of breath. And we're going to be talking in this video about reed activation, which is a fascinating topic because nobody ever talks about it. Nobody ever writes about it. But there's so much you can learn, and it will make you a better musician. But let's back up and take a look at one more idea again, because this is the principal idea from this whole series. When you go to grow as a musician with a musical instrument, to reach high levels of success, you can think of your training as a pyramid in Egypt. And the bottom has to be solid granite stone and thick so that it can bear the weight of increasing skills over the years. But the most important foundation stone in that pyramid, by far, is the breath. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about reeds, and then we're going to talk about how to handle them, okay? But first, let's take a peek, and for those of you that have not looked at a reed on a harmonica, I've just removed a cover from half, and the little things here that are metal with the little screw things at the bottom, those are the reeds, and they move because of air, and that displaces molecules in the air and transmits sound to the ear. So that's what a reed is. Okay, now, but the more that you understand about how that reed operates and what it does and the ways that you're going to manipulate it, helps you to control this instrument. Okay, well, here's the first idea. Do you remember Newtonian physics and the idea that a body at rest wants to stay at rest? And it takes kind of energy, to get it moving. But then once it's moving, it's easier to keep it moving because a body in motion tends to stay in motion. So a body at rest tends to stay at rest, and a body in motion tends to stay in motion. Why would I be bringing this up? Because the reed is a mass of metal, okay? And when it's not moving, it wants to stay at rest. But once it's moving and vibrating, it wants to keep moving. So what does that mean? Well, there's a very exciting hint for you there, which is it's going to take more breath to get that reed to start to move than it will be to keep it moving. Well, that's interesting. So that means that when you go to play a note on your harmonica, it takes 2x or more breath to get it started to make a sound, but then you want to back off the air to keep the volume low. It's a very, very intriguing concept for you to think about. And that matters because high and low volume levels and dynamics are extremely important to us as musicians. So what I want to do right now is just to show you that when you play a note softly, you give it a certain amount of breath, but then back it off if you want that volume to be low. Otherwise, it's going to kind of stay high. Here we go. So I activate it, and it went up to da, and then to make it down, da. To make it quieter, I had to back off the breath. So when you go to manage dynamics on your harmonica, you want to keep that in mind. If you want a soft tone, activate the reed and then back it off. So this is like a concept, okay? It's a concept in training on harmonica where you start thinking about what you're doing when you play as activation of a reed. You activate the reed with your breath, and then you manage it. Interesting thought. But there's a process to activating the reed, and there's a process to managing the reed once it's going. Understanding that the amount of breath it's going to take you to get that reed to start moving is more breath than is needed to create a small amount of volume. So you gotta back off. Of course, when you want more volume, you know you're going to give it more air pressure. You know that. Okay, so to repeat what we just talked about, because it's a new concept, a reed gets activated and then it gets managed. Well, let's talk about the various ways that you can actually activate a reed. Okay? And they all sound different. I'm going to list them and then I'm going to explain them in detail. Okay, one way to activate a reed is to allow your diaphragm to move air to the reed in a gradually increasing manner, like this. That's a diaphragm-centered start to the note where the diaphragm is just feeding air like a bellows. Most notes are played just diaphragmatically. So in other words, the reed is activated by a gradual increase in air, or fairly quick, from the diaphragm. So that's one way to activate the reed. Now, let's talk about a second way to activate a reed, which would be not to have the diaphragm slowly increasing air pressure, but to pop the air by taking and drawing your tongue back to create a little burst of air like this. Well, listen to the difference between the tongue-activated reed sound, which was, versus the diaphragm, or slower, burst versus slow. Well, that's really important to know, because as a musician, just like a wonderful jazz saxophone player, there's times that you're going to want to use that tongue and create a burst that creates a very distinct, sharp start to the note. Well, that's a completely different thing than feeding from the diaphragm. So that would be the second one, which is to use the tongue. And you're just like spitting out peas is one way that it's described, where you, like this, you pucker, and then like if you were spitting something out of your mouth. That particular action, because as your tongue draws back, the air rushes past and it's a burst of air. Okay, so that would be the first two. Now, there's more. There's more. Okay, there is also an area called the larynx glottis. And that's right in here, and it's kind of a thing that has muscles and tissue, and it can control air movement. That's actually where you do larynx glottis vibrato. That's larynx glottis. Now, how do you find that part of the body if you don't know where it's at? Well, here's the little thing I came up with. Okay, you're going to gargle, okay, and that is where the larynx glottis is. So here we go. That's it. So my point is that if you're not sure, where is the larynx glottis? Where's that part of my body? Just this is it. And so you can use that as a gate. to control the start and the stop of notes. So that's another way to control airflow to the reed and reed activation. It has its own distinct sound. It is deeper in tone than the tongue. Listen, here's the tongue one again. Now let's do the larynx glottis. Deeper, richer. Why? I'm using more of the body. The start of the tone, it goes down more. So that has its own sound. Now, there's another way to activate. So to repeat, what do we have so far? Slow increase of air or a fast off the diaphragm. Okay, or tongue. 2. 3, larynx glottis. Okay, that was 3. Now, 4 is the lips. The lips. The lips can start off closed and open up. And that will also be another way to activate that reed. Sounds like. It comes slowly because the air just gets by the lips a little bit and then more. So it's a new sound, a different sound. So it's your lips acting as a gate. You put it up against the hole with the lips closed and you open them up a little bit. Okay, so that's 4. There is a 5th way to activate a reed. How am I doing that? How am I changing from blow to draw so quickly? I'm not using the diaphragm at all. That's just air in my mouth. I've closed off the glottis and larynx, and I'm just doing that. I'm not saying you're going to use it a lot, but you're going to use it some. And I call that one chirping. Now, I have a big hint for you, and I want you to just kind of consider this idea. When you play, don't let your cheeks puff out. Because it takes time for them to come back in for the draw. So correct embouchure and the correct use of the mouth, keep the sides tighter. So you can, versus, you want to keep these cheeks correct and a little tighter. So, one of the things that you're going to find as you start getting more control of activating reeds is that reeds can misbehave. Now, what happens is that there's this thing called a breath saver, which is a little piece of plastic that seals the reed plate in the reed when you're blowing and drawing to increase the, just whether you can bend it, it increases the amount of air pressure that can be applied. And when this reed plate is cold and you start blowing air, it condenses a little bit of moisture on the reed plate and that plastic breath saver starts sticking. And let me give you a demonstration of that. Hear that pop? That's the moment that the breath saver releases off the reed plate. That was an example of a breath saver sticking, and it had stiction because there's a little bit of moisture on top of that brass reed plate from the air that you're blowing, and then this little piece of plastic sticks to it, so you're going to hear that pop sound, pop sound. Okay, well, it's an interesting point. I don't know if you knew this, but regardless of whether your harmonica is cross-tuned or straight-tuned, all of the blow reeds are always on the outside, not on the inside, because there's reeds that play on the inside of this reed plate too. They're on the outside, so you can take a little piece of paper and like dry them if you need to. But I want to show you how to beat that breath saver problem without doing that. And what you do is you buy a heating pad somewhere. You can get them for like 11 bucks at Walmart. And you take the heating pad and you take a couple of towels and you put one towel on top of the pad like that. You put in the harmonica, or maybe you put two over it. You go like this, you turn it on low for 10 minutes. What's happening? It heats up that reed plate, okay? And it won't condense moisture anymore. So for performance, or really for every time I play, unless I'm playing a Seidel Saxony where the breath savers don't stick because they're dimpled. But for the other instruments I have, I always use a heating pad and I warm things up. And I think you'll find that it will make a huge difference in your having no problems with those breath savers. Because when your breath savers start sticking, you have no option but to increase the volume, to pop those quickly. And that means you've lost some of your lower volume in your playing. So again, to recap what we've covered so far, we've talked about really 5 different ways to activate a reed. You have diaphragmatic, okay, which is the air comes from the diaphragm slowly and activates the reed. The other was the tongue and the pucker. Kind of a bright sound. The other one was larynx glottis. Little richer. The next one, of course, is the lips, where the lips act as a gate. And the last one, of course, in the series would be this, where you're just like this with your glottis closed. Okay, so that's 5 ways to activate the reed. And I said this is advanced material for harmonica players. But I think you can master every one of these by putting some time in. And now we're going to start our video number 5 on breath. And we're going to talk about the pervasive problem that almost all players, even some at the top, they're top professionals, play the draw notes slightly flat. We're going to talk about why. Okay. Again, most players, when they're playing in performance or practicing, are going to pull those notes flat for the